Welcome. Since Tuesday's lecture had so much material in it, today we're going to do in this video a real quick recap. We'll start with this class exercise, September 21st of 2021. Notice there are multiple versions that I saved throughout the lectures, so students who are running a little bit behind could catch up with me. We're not going to worry about those in the video. We're going to focus on the original template that you started class with. That template looked like this, where you had a pre-built dashboard, some headers for a model, and then a couple of things over here saying linked cells and notes and comments. And the layout here with 4 quadrants is based on simply coming here, selecting a column, holding down Control, selecting a row, shading those, maybe changing the width of this column. So we get some shaded cells that make it look like we have divided that screen up into 4 quadrants. There are more fancy ways to do that by tiling windows so they scroll independently and things. All we want is just a line in the sand saying we've got 4 different quadrants here. And once we have that, we can draw a dashboard up here, we can build out a model down here, and then when we adjust rows and columns for one, they don't affect rows and columns of the other. We can deal with changes to linked cells and notes and comment sections a little bit easier than we can in these other two. Let's go ahead and build out the model. So in this one, it's an annual retirement model, and we are looking at our age, our beginning age, current age for our client, and the client's beginning net worth. The amount in equities is going to be that beginning net worth times the amount in allocated to equities. And notice we need to use this cell. We don't want to use this cell because each year when we copy this formula down, our beginning net worth is almost certainly going to be different. And we will also want to get absolute references by hitting F4. So F14 is now locked. And with cash, we could calculate it from our beginning net worth and our percent allocation to cash, which we haven't even calculated yet. Or we could just take the difference between the total portfolio minus the amount allocated to equities. Then we don't need any absolute references. I think this formula is much easier to audit later than this formula. Apologies, my neighbor decided to start mowing their grass when I started recording. Investment earnings. Okay, that's going to be the amount in equities times the return, annual return on equities, plus the amount in cash times the annual return on cash with appropriate absolute references. And then we'll have a paycheck coming in each year, so absolute references. And expenses going out each year, I'm going to make them negative to show that as an outflow. And my ending net worth, we're going to use the sum, take our beginning net worth and use a comma, put some more things in this list like that range, and then we'll be able to copy that down. Next year's beginning age, or next year's age rather, is just previous year's age plus 1. The beginning net worth is the ending net worth from the previous year. Everything else should Control-C copy, Control-V paste, using those arrows to get around. Then everything should copy down. I think I told you in class to go to row 119, just so that when we put some chart data out here, it will show up on the chart. And we went down there and I think we should have about 46 million total. If you've got 46,863 at this point, you are on the right track. But you're also assuming you're going to get a paycheck and pay expenses up to age, where did this thing kick off? 142, completely random. So let's put in a couple of things to fix that. Let's put in an if statement that says, instead of just looking at F22, let's say if my age is greater than my retirement age, $signs, then I don't get a paycheck anymore. Otherwise, I do get this paycheck, $signs. Do the same thing over here. If my current age, or if the age is greater than, now expenses are going to start when I die, so that's my anticipated lifespan, F4. Then stop those expenses, otherwise use a negative F24 with dollar signs. If I copy those two, Control C, Control V, then the paycheck stops after 65 and the expenses stop after 95. Let's go back and do one more thing. Let's check. We don't want to mess with this first cell because all it does is look at the current net worth. Let's look at this cell, and instead of just blindly pulling down the ending net worth, let's kind of do the same thing there. Let's say if this age is greater than the anticipated lifespan, F4, then go to 0. Otherwise, go ahead and use this ending net worth. So copy, paste, and now everything shuts off after 95, which is our anticipated lifespan. And so we get a bit more realistic picture of when the paycheck, the expenses, and the net worth is going to apply. Do one more thing. We're going to say if the age is greater than our anticipated lifspan, F4. This time, instead of 0, I want you to say in a open close parentheses. All that's going to do is throw an error. Otherwise, go ahead and use the age. And if I copy that down and paste it, then notice that after the client dies, after 95 years of age, that throws an error. But what it means is that if we try to plot that data, we can only plot the numbers on this chart. We can't plot the NAs. So the ending net worth here, and I already had the chart looking at these two columns. So look what we have. We've got age and net worth down to here, and then we have errors and zeros. As long as those are errors, it's not going to show up on this XY scatter chart anyway. So now we see from the current age through retirement, we're making a lot of money. After that, we actually have enough earnings to offset our annual expenses and then some. So our nest egg continues to grow until 95, which is the end of our plan. Now let's say we were only getting 4% return on our equities. That would not be enough for this to continue to grow. And by the way, one of our assumptions is that equities and cash both have guaranteed returns. Probably the most ridiculous assumption that I could make, but we'll save that for Module 3. Today they get guaranteed returns in the stock market of 5%. Now we have our model working, and what we want to do is tie these spin buttons, and we got there by going to Developer, which by the way we got there by going to File, Options, Customize Ribbon, and clicking on this Developer box. So if you don't see the Developer tab up here, go to File, Options, Customize Ribbon, and click on this Developer box. And then you'll see Developer, from which you can choose Insert, from which you can choose a spin button. Never ever use ActiveX controls this entire semester. All we want is form controls. So choose the spin button off of form controls, draw one, and then you'll be able to right click on it, format it, and link it to a cell. Now if I just say OK, which I'm going to do, that says the cell is currently 0, and the minimum value that I could scroll down to or spin down to is 0. But if I wanted to click up 30,000 times, then I could get as high as 30,000, but that would be the max. Probably not realistic, but who am I to put an upper limit on somebody's age? So I'm just going to leave it at the default of 30,000. What I am going to do is change the current value. Instead of 55, I'm going to say 53, just to show you that as soon as I link it to this cell and give it a current value, it changed from 55 to 53. The point of doing all this is so that we can click away from there, come back and click, go up to 54, go up to 55. And so look, the older the client is when they come to us wanting to retire at 65 with all of these other assumptions, the more difficult it's going to be for them to meet their retirement goal of having some money left when they run out of years. So I'm going to back that back to 55. The earlier they come to us, the more money they will have left because they're coming to us with the same $1 million. All right, so we're going to do these the same way. We're going to right click, format that control, link it to the adjacent cell, set the current value. I'm going to do this one to 63. And again, who am I to put an upper limit on somebody's retirement age? So I'm just going to leave it at the default of 30,000 and keep going. Click away. This thing's selected. It won't work until I click away and then come back. Bump that back up to 65. Same thing for the lifespan, format control, link to the cell. Give it a current value. Let's do 97 this time. 0 to 30,000 is default. It works for me. Now it's set on 97, so I want to back that down to 95. So now we're right back where we started, but we can come in and change all of these inputs with these spin buttons. When we get to this one, if I right click, format control, link it to this cell, I'd like that maximum value to get higher than 30,000. In fact, I'd like the initial value to be 1 million. However, watch what happens when I try. It gives me this error. I call it the integer from 0 to 30,000 problem. What it's saying is that we can't use a number less than 0 or greater than 30,000 in these cells. The best we can do is 30,000. So let's do this. Let's pick I'm going to cancel that. Let's pick a cell down here. And when I link these cells, if it's not on the dashboard, I don't want to mess up my pretty dashboard. But when I link them, if I'll color it yellow with an Alt-HH to get you to the menu, and then say that it is my current net worth. Now I can link this cell down here to this intermediate cell, and I'm going to give it an intermediate value of 1,000. So that's within my 0 to 30,000 range that's allowed. And watch what happens. Now I can control the yellow cell using the spin button. However, it's not moving the cell I need to move. Well, if I can work this one effectively around 1,000, why don't I come up here and write a formula that says whatever you get there times 1,000. And now I can indirectly change this cell using that spin button. Now up here I could come in and type a different number, 50, and then run it back up to 55 because those are linked directly. Down here they're not linked directly. If I wanted to type 1 million right there, then I'm not going to do it because I can't undo it after I touch the spinner. But if I type 1 million there, I've just written over that formula that looks down here. I can't type a number in there. So I have to leave this formula in there. And to make sure I don't mess things up, I'm going to go and format that one like this. So it kind of implies that, hey, it's in a box, it's next to a spin button, you can change it, but don't be trying to type in there. If it's white, it's okay to type in there. Now, notice how long it would take me to get. I've had to hit this 500 times to go to 1.5 million. So I'd like it to step a little more quickly. Instead of counting by thousands, I'd like it to count by hundreds of thousands. I'm going to right click, format control, and give it a incremental change, 100 times larger than 1. And now I'm counting in more realistic increments. If the client told me they had 1.123 million, then I'd come in here and write 1, 1, 2, 3, and I could get it exactly. But I think for most intents and purposes, just a nice 1.2, 1.3 is going to be enough accuracy for our purposes. All right, similar problem when I come down here. If I right click, format control, try to link to this cell, and then try to give it an incremental range of 0.01 if I want to count by percentages, or give it a maximum value of of 1 if I want to limit that to 1. It's going to give me a similar error. Actually, it's not going to give me an error, it's just going to round it. If I want to count by 0.01 and I say OK, Then when I come back and check to see, does that still say 0.01? It changed it to a 0. So we're going to have to do the same thing. Come down here and say percent to equities. And this time we will link this cell not to F14 but to F35. And we want it to count from 0 to, let's say, 100 in steps of 1, the current value of 5. But we want this one to be equals this divided by 100. And now, oh, I'm sorry, 7. This would be a good teaching moment. All right, so now we can change that by 1 at a time. I don't want it to say 5%. I was confusing myself with this box. I want it to say 70%. As we said before, if I type a 70% in here, I'm going to ruin that formula. I can come down here and type a 70. This formula divides it by 70 and calls it by 100 and calls it 70%. And so now I can change my allocation to equities like so. The more I put in this guaranteed 5% rate of return, or 5% annual return, the better the portfolio looks. That's because our stock is not, our equities don't have any risk. Unrealistic, but teaching purposes. Okay, get down to this one, percent allocation to cash. Well, that's not even anything I can change. I certainly don't need there, so I don't need that spin button. I'd made a mistake. I'm going to right click and cut it. And here I'm just going to put a formula that says 1 minus the amount going to equities. So whatever doesn't go to equities goes to cash. And down here where we calculated our investment earnings, we used the return on cash, but we didn't use the allocation to cash because we already had it. Probably what I should say is right here. We didn't multiply our beginning net worth by 30%, which we could have done. Instead, I chose to just subtract off the amount going to equities. Hit pause and think about that. You could do it either way. This is a little bit easier to look at. Okay, let's link the next 4. And notice they're either going to be percentages or they're going to be greater than 30,000. So each one is going to need an intermediate cell down here. To save some time, I'm going to click and then hold down my control key, just like we did for the column and the row. Control, click, 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 turn those yellow, and then give them some labels. These two are going to look at the appropriate cell and divide it by 100 to get back to a percent. And then these two are going to look at the appropriate cell and multiply it by 1,000. I don't know why I didn't just copy the first formula. Take that cell, multiply by 1,000. So then when I select, when I link this spin button here, I think my annual return was 5%. So if I make the current value 5, and there's really no point in putting a maximum value on that, so we'll leave it there. The annual return on cash, need to format that control, give it a current value of 1, and link the cell here. Then right click, format the control, link it here. Annual net paycheck, I think was 100,000. So I'll do 100, and then this formula is going to multiply it by 1,000. Right click, format control, cell link to annual expenses, which I think we said are 70,000. So I'm going to do a 70 and let this multiply it by 1,000. And on most of these, I've left the minimum and the max as the defaults. Because again, who am I to say what the upper limit on your annual net paycheck should be? However, there is one I want to come back and fix. That's the percent allocation to equities. So if I right click on that, okay, I did fix it. It's minimum 0, maximum 100, and then our current value is 70. So we can't put more than 100 into equities. We can't put less than 0 into equities. So we got that right first time through. All right, I think that captures everything we did with the controls. So hopefully you can follow along with the video and recreate that. The other thing we did in class was fix this zoom to fit button. We want the zoom to fit button to run 3 actions when we click it. We want it to select this area of the dashboard. We want it to go to View, Zoom to Selection, and then we want it to click cell A1. So let's zoom back out and do that. Let's right click, assign a macro, call it Zoom to Fit. Don't use any spaces or special characters in here. Just stick with letters and no spaces. And then record it, but make sure that you're going to store, or make sure when you record it that you are putting it not in your personal macro book, but in this workbook, so that it goes wherever this workbook goes. You can even assign a hotkey. I like to assign a capital Z to it. When I hold down the Shift key and hit Z, it gives me a shift right here. So to run this macro, I could either click on that button, or I could do a Control-Shift-Z. And the description here is select the dashboard area and zoom to fit screen. This would be really helpful if you're giving a presentation on someone else's computer and you just want to very quickly come in there and just hit a button. What 3 actions did I say this wanted to do? It wanted to select that, go to View, Zoom to Selection, and then select that. Now I want to stop recording before I do anything else. And you don't need to do this, but I'm going to go over and look at the code by hitting Alt F11. Double click on Modules and Module 1. And I told you I wanted to do 3 things. I wanted to select A1 to Q27. I didn't say I wanted to activate Q27, but after you select something, notice if I select something, my cursor's got to be somewhere. It could be at M2, it could be at O2, it could be at O5, M5. It could be in any one of these cells. That's the active cell, and this whole range is the selection. Now we don't care what the active cell is. And by the way, I've got around this with Control period to do that if you ever need to do that. We don't care what the active cell is, we just care what the range is. So I could actually delete this line of VBA. And then the second action we do definitely want to do is take that active window and zoom to whatever is selected, so true, and then select range A1. Those are the 3 actions we wanted it to take. As I said in class, by the time I walk to the car, am I going to remember that active window.zoom equals true is how you write the code in VBA to zoom to fit the screen? No, I don't need to remember that. I'll just record it the next time I need to use it, and then I'll have it. Having said that, let's see if it works. Click on Zoom to Fit. Bingo, it works. Let's zoom in too much. Click on, this time I'll use the keyboard shortcut Control-Shift-Z, and that works just as well as clicking on this. In fact, if I were in a client presentation or upper management presentation, it might be cleaner to just come in here and use my keyboard shortcuts, Control-Shift-Z, and they wouldn't even see me moving my mouse around to that button. But if they wanted to use the model, they'd have it here available to use. In a subsequent class and video, we'll talk about the others. That's all we covered in class, so that's all I'll cover in this video. I hope the review is helpful. One quick addendum to this video. Remember on this formula for the current net worth, since we used the linked cell below and then a formula here, I shaded that blue. I think I should go back and do it here, Control, click, 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 and then shade all of those cells blue. Since they're all really linked down here, I don't want to accidentally come back and type in any of these cells. Only the white ones do I want to type in. Hope that helps.